Hi there, and welcome to the Unleash This podcast by Unleash Technologies. My name is Dustin, and I'll be hosting the episode today. Today, we're going to be talking about digital strategy, what that is, what it means, why we use it at Unleash, why it's so important. And who better to do that than our own Director of Strategy, Caroline. Caroline, why don't I throw the ball over to you? Introduce yourself, tell us what you do at Unleash, a little bit about your background before we jump into the conversation.
Sure. My name is Caroline Bennick. I am the Director of Strategy, as Dustin mentioned, here at Unleashed. That means that, as soon as a project is kicking off or a new initiative is kicking off, I'm kind of leading my team of strategists, creatives, working closely with the PMs to kick off the process that we're about to talk about here on this podcast. But I'll be pretty involved throughout the entire process. A little bit about my background. I've been in the digital web space for about 12 or so years, and I've been at Unleashed for 2 years. So excited to talk to you guys a little bit about what strategy means to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where we're going to go. I know you and I have conversations a lot about strategy. I know your team is involved in really every project that hits the company here at Unleashed. And so, why don't we just start with an overall description of our strategy service, and we'll dig in, a little bit deeper as we go, and why we prioritize strategic planning at Unleashed, why we think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step that I think often might get overlooked potentially when people are thinking about, rebuilding their website or doing a refresh or things like that. But if you think about it in this way, I like to think about it. So if you were going to build, let's just say, a brand new construction on a home, would you just tell the builder to just get started or not have, a blueprint, for example? I feel like a strategy, creating that website strategy is kind of the blueprint of, what are we're ensuring that, we aren't just designing a beautiful website, because of course it will be beautiful, just for the sake of making something new and beautiful. You want to know ahead of time, it looks pretty, but is it achieving my goals? So we want to make sure that our clients know what they are getting. And we're super intentional in our decisions, and we have research backing that and testing to make sure that not only is it beautiful, but it's achieving those KPIs and those target audiences and converting and doing all of the things that you would hope a redesign, or whether this can be for a small initiative or a redesign, or anything, that it's effective and you're not just just saying to a builder, hey, just go build this house, and not knowing what you're getting. Is it proven? Does it work? That's kind of why we feel like it's so important, because it's those initial building blocks that we kind of expand upon.
Yeah, and it makes total sense, right? I mean, no, the answer is no. I would not go to a builder and say, go build a house. Here's the land. Like, that would be insanity. But it is kind of interesting to have had conversations with you and others at the organization, is that sometimes there's that thinking around a website that it's just that simple. It's just, we'll
Yeah,
just go build a website.
right.
But not here, right? We want to make sure, like you said, that it's actually accomplishing the goals that we have set out together as a team. We use the word partnership around here a lot. We don't like to use the word vendor, because we're trying to come alongside our clients and help them achieve their goals via the website. And I've heard you preach on it like a bunch of times. So obviously, I think I've kind of got some of the lingo down. But let's go back to the very beginning. Like, okay, sure, let's do a strategy project. Let's make sure we have a strategy before we build our website. That sounds like a good idea. Of course it is. But what do we do first? Like, where does the process start?
Yeah. So the first thing that we do, we kind of call this discovery. So we want to know everything. So this would be kind of our intake period.
Mm,
So we want to know, a lot of our clients come to us and they may have, in past projects or whatever it be, have done surveys or gotten information from their users that might have informed them to start down this process. We want to get any information that's already out there. It's okay if a client doesn't have that information, but we want to make sure that if you do have some of that information, even if it's old, that we are learning as much as we can about the organization, about what the goals are, about any existing thing that might be there. And this also includes, looking at your current site. So just by looking at a site, we can kind of see what we're working with, where we can identify some weak spots already. We want to look at the analytics. We just kind of want to look under the hood. We want to know what we can find out without doing too much. We're not getting too deep yet. What is already out there that we can find out? So, who are your competitors? We often will install tools such as Hotjar, for example, to do heat mapping on your current site and recordings so that we can see how people are currently using your site, because the way that you think that your users are using your site might not be how they're actually using it. So those things can tell us a lot without really talking to anyone yet. So this is kind of just from the jump. Give us all the information that you already have, and then we can kind of move on to, the next steps.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. Like, where do you start? Get all the data, right? That sounds like what we're talking about. Analytics, user, site reviews, user journey, like heat mapping, things that you're talking about. I think that makes total sense because people who have been in the industry as long as we have, especially you and the rest of the strategy team have, you can infer a lot of information really quickly just by looking at how people are currently using the site, where they drop off, where they rage click, all those types of things. Like, that can tell you a lot about what the new site probably needs to either improve on or maintain rather quickly. But you mentioned next without even talking to anybody. So I assume we have some conversations as part of this process too.
Yeah. So the next step would really be to start talking to your stakeholders. They could just be a small group of, the people that are on your marketing team that are very intimately involved with the project, or they could be higher up. Or, for example, I've done a lot of healthcare website redesigns before, and they've determined that some of their most important stakeholders are not only their patients, but also their doctors. So we've set up different stakeholder meetings with, different groups of people, and we tailor the questions that we ask each group of stakeholders to who they are. So the questions I would ask the marketing team to learn more about are going to be different from what I would ask a physician for in the hospital example. Also, if you have a really large group that, maybe just doing these stakeholder sit downs and meetings is just not feasible, we can create a survey that we can send out to specific groups, but we tailor those questions. They're not a one size fits all. We write those questions based on what we've learned about your website and your industry and your competitors. So it's not just a blanket list of questions that we would ask anyone. So we're trying to make the most of our time. So we want to get, as much information as we can from those specific groups.
Absolutely, and I think you've said before, in those conversations, a lot of times we find, kind of some hidden goals that maybe other stakeholders have for the site that the people we're talking to on a daily basis maybe didn't share with us or think to share with us or didn't know about. And so these stakeholder conversations and these questionnaires and offering people a platform to share what they hope the website turns into, I think opens up a lot of eyes and opens up a lot of really healthy conversations for our clients to have, to make sure that the goals that we set out for the website make the most sense and are the actual goals for the website, right? I mean, you've told me about that several times, right? I've gotten to see behind the scenes a little bit, but maybe share just a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of clients come to us and they already know some of what their KPIs or goals are. And that's great. And we can help, expand on those further. How can we get a little bit more out of those? And then a lot of other clients come to us and they have no idea what their KPIs are. They don't know what their goals are. So what we do is we work with them to create them. So again, just by looking at all of the information that we gathered in discovery, by talking to the stakeholders and the surveys. So we might learn a lot about one of the questions that we typically do ask in those, stakeholder exercises, if you will, are what are your pain points? And what do you perceive as pain points? And this is particularly helpful when we are talking to end users for the website, if they are giving us direct pain points. And we can also see those in the video recordings that I mentioned earlier. So you can see where, like you said, rage clicking or getting stuck, but we can also see where they're trying to go. So where they're trying to go is something that we want to make easier for them. So we help either expand upon KPIs or goals that you already have, or we help you create them and give you some ideas on what a lot of people in that same industry are going for.
Hmm. Yeah, well, you even said, okay, so we are thinking a couple steps ahead here with our clients and helping our clients, and you had the perfect segue. So I'm going to just jump right in and steal it. Where are our clients trying to go? Right? Where are our clients trying to go on the website? Right? That implies that there's an actual pathway. There's an actual goal that we're trying to achieve. Right?
Yeah.
There are real people who are trying to accomplish some real task on this real website, and so that gets into what is our third topic of conversation today: journey mapping and persona creation, right?
Yeah. So, again, a lot of times clients will come to us and they think that they know who their target audience is. They think they know who their personas are, and that's great. We can take those again and expand upon those. A lot of clients come to us and they have no idea. So, what we like to start with is the persona creation. Again, talking to these stakeholders, you guys, clients typically will have a good idea in mind. So going back to the hospital example, they know that their target audiences are mainly patients. They might be doctors trying to make a referral. They might be people looking for a job. They might be people trying to donate. They might be a caregiver. There's a lot of different things that right off the bat that they will know. But what they might not know is all of the different action points and places that they want them to be interacting with. So there's a lot of different levels of this. So if we take the example of association, for example, and they know that one of their KPIs or goals is they want to increase membership. Well, there could be a lot of different types of personas that are looking for a membership. There's people that are in different parts of their journey. So there could be people that know about this association. They're on the cusp of signing up to become a member. They are really informed. It's kind of a no-brainer for them. There's a group of people that may know nothing about this association and they stumble upon the website and they might need a little bit more information and pushing to get to where they're like, I really want to become a member. There could be people that are sent there by, their organization and their organization wants them to become a member. So there's a lot of different, you think that you know your personas, but what are the different steps that you want to catch them at? Because they can be very different per persona. So that's why we do journey mapping. So once we have these personas defined, we want to look at what are all of the different pathways that can get them to all of the different KPIs that we might want them to take. So whether back to the example of an association and the membership, the journey to becoming a member might look different for someone who knows a lot about the industry and knows a lot about this association to someone who's completely new to this world. So, if it's someone who knows, for example, someone who knows a lot about the industry, maybe we want to, push them to sign up for our newsletter, push them to be taking, if we have any webinars or things like that, kind of some intermediary steps to get them, push them over the edge into signing up to become a member. Whereas someone who's completely new to the industry and is just kind of shopping around, and we might need to be a little bit more informational. So, what are we about? Why should you become a member here versus a member at one of the competitors, for example? So, the journeys that all might end up at the same KPI or conversion might be totally different depending on the persona. So, that's why it's so important to determine what those personas are and make sure that we have a journey for all of those personas to each of the conversions that we want them to make. So
Yeah,
do
so to me, I
we
think. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to
go
interrupt you.
ahead.
I think that's exactly the point that when I have conversations with folks, coming from the sales and marketing side, to me, that's when I get the most excited being able to share these types of strategic conversations that we have with our prospects, because a lot of prospects don't think about that. They need to have these 15 pages, these 20 pages. Every other website in their space, has a page about topic A and topic B and topic C. And so we're just going to kind of mirror those pages. And we just know that there's a page that, a series of pages that we need to have. But I think where we obviously stand out and where you lead our team to stand out is, yeah, you got to have all those pages, but how do those pages interact? How do we push one person from the About Us page to a different page, to a different page, to a different page, to eventually drive them to that conversion action, right? That subscription, that sign up, that schedule an appointment, that make a purchase, action, and doing that with that extra layer stacked on top of the persona, understanding where they're probably at in their human journey and how that's going to be a little bit different based on their website journey. They're going to have those two things layered together to get to that end goal. And I think that's really unique. I've personally, I've sold websites for a lot of years in my life, but this is the first place where I've worked where we've had this product, this service, something that's uniquely different, and why I wanted you on the podcast today to have a conversation about it. You can tell I'm pretty pumped. Let me pivot us to the next step. What should be on the website, right? Do our customers need to bring everything from their old site to their new? And what does that process look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, once we kind of have those goals and personas down, we really want to know, because content is the one thing that if you're talking about a website rebuild or even just a smaller initiative, that's going to hold you up. That is the thing that you need to be working on even before you even thought about a rebuild. So it is something that is so important. So what we like to do is take a full content inventory. So we want to know everything that's on the site. We want to know that there could be pages on there, and this happens all the time, that we'll do a content inventory and we'll kind of be combing through it and we'll be like, so what exactly is this section of pages? And the client will be like, I completely forgot that those even existed. Like, we don't even do that anymore, but we found it in our, scan of the site. So are there things on your website that are completely buried? Are there things that you don't even offer anymore? Are there things that you need to maybe rewrite? So this is a big one. So we kind of take, it's pretty much a giant spreadsheet. We run a scan of your whole site, and then we have all of the links. So what we look at, this really important content? Is this conducive to our goals of the new website? Do we want to keep this? Yes or no? So we kind of go through that. What of this is something that is no longer part of our goals and we can get rid of? What is something that is really lacking but could be a great opportunity to write content for, to reach a new audience? So we'll kind of mark down in that spreadsheet, this can be sunset, this we should rewrite, this is a totally new topic that we think you could get a whole new audience and a whole new list of customers for if we were to kind of write about this and include this in your offering. Kind of categorizing everything. And this is something we want to do in the very beginning, like I mentioned, because doing the content writing and kind of massaging everything takes a long time. So you want to be starting this at the beginning and not when your website is about to go live and you're combing through hundreds of pages and trying to migrate things and you kind of haven't thought about it. So the content really also helps drive the design. So if you don't have great content when we're kind of getting into the design phase, that's okay. We still know what the goals are. We can, as we call it, lorem ipsum out the designs. But we know what specific, we know that we want, calls to action and things like that. They can be defined at a later time. But it's something that we want to start early because this kind of pushes us into where we are refining the sitemap. I don't know if I want to pause there if you want to, or to talk about the sitemap.
Yeah, I mean that's where we go next, right? It's the content inventory. It's making sure all that makes sense, and then yeah, it's that sitemap wireframe kind of step. Yeah, you tell us what happens once the content is happening, and we're going through that inventory and that audit. My assumption is there's kind of a parallel path thing happening here where the client then goes back and says, okay, I got to figure out what to do with all this content. What needs to be rewritten? What do we need to delete? What do we want to keep? And they're doing that in the background while we start taking that next active step, which is those wireframe site mapping type of things, right? I mean, that's the next logical step.
Yeah, yeah. So once we have a good idea of the structure that we want the site to be in, we will create a sitemap. So a sitemap is essentially the IA of your website. So what do you want in your utility navigation? What should be listed in the main navigation? How should content be grouped? So a lot of times when we are doing these content inventories, we'll find content hanging out that is categorized under something that doesn't really make sense to be there, and it's buried, and we can find out from the recordings that we're watching or the stakeholder interviews, etc., that people aren't able to find that information, and it's really important for them to find. So what is a more logical way to organize it? So that is a huge step. I think it's one of the most important steps in the entire strategy, is reorganizing the content that we've decided is important to keep going forward. Where does that go? And what is the most important thing to have on the main navigation? What can we move to the utility navigation? What are we putting in the footer? Those types of things really guide the next phases of the strategy.
Yeah.
And what we can do, and what we typically recommend, is doing tree testing on that. So what tree testing means is we'll use a tool and we'll have X amount of participants. And what we will do is show them an image of the sitemap. So the sitemap will just kind of look like a website header and footer and utility nav. And we'll ask questions like, where would you click to find information about their podcasts or something like that. And we see if these users are able to click in like the correct parent navigation item
Mhm.
as to where it's underneath of. So are we organizing things correctly? Are people able to easily find these items? And have we done a good job with the sitemap? If not, we'll go back and reorganize things and tree test again. We want to make sure it's super intuitive, and just where maybe the client or we might think that information makes the most logical sense to live might not be the perfect place for it. So kind of testing and proving that we put it in the right place, that's the easiest to find.
Yeah, based on the consumer behavior, which I think is unique, right? So many times you have conversations with web agencies and digital agencies, and even marketing teams and web teams at these companies, and they're just so convinced that X content should live under X header, and they a lot of times can be right, and sometimes we find out that's not necessarily the way that the end customer, uses the website, and so there's that little bit of, okay, we have to kind of get ourselves out of the way a little bit and do what's best for the customer. And I'm glad that you brought up tree testing, because again, that's a good, strong, unique way to make sure that any product we build not only accomplishes our customers' KPIs, but make sure that their customers actually get what they're looking for in the quickest way possible. All right, so that was the next step. What's next? Tell me what happens after that.
So now we get into more of the fun part. After we kind of have all of that figured out, we move into wireframing. So if you're not familiar with wireframing, it's essentially a black and white design, sort of, if you will, that's making sure that we are accounting for spaces essentially throughout the page. So if you were to see a homepage wire, we would have the navigation built out to where these are the things that we're going to have top level. These are what items are going to be in your utility navigation. On the homepage, we're going to have a hero that's going to include X, Y, and Z. Underneath, we're going to have these calls to actions. It's not the frilly design with the colors. It's black and white. Do we have the content in the right spot? And are we accounting for every type of content that we've determined that we need through all of the previous steps? So then again, what we do, so we do desktop and mobile of these wireframes. Depending on how large your site is how many wireframes, and for desktop and mobile that we will do. We'll make sure that we do one for every, unique piece of content that we need to do it for, so that we're completely organized in covering all of our bases, basically. And then again, what we like to do is test these. So using a tool, again, what we would do is, these are, kind of just flat documents, if you will. Ask users to where they would click to find something. So it's very similar to the tree testing, but it's more places than just the navigation. So tree testing is more the navigation, how we organize the content. The wireframes is more, are we organizing the content actually on the page in an intuitive fashion? if that makes sense.
Yeah, when it's a very different user experience, right? Some users, and I think you would support this. Some users tend to just go to a menu and look for the specific things that they're looking for. Other users scroll down the page and go, "Is the thing that I'm looking for on this page?" Right? Catering to, I like to almost say both types of brains, right? Like your analytical, who's like, okay, this header, this subheader, that I'm getting exactly to where I want, and the person who's trying to take in a lot more information and go, okay, can I navigate through these images and these buttons and these pictures, and can I get to the blog from the homepage? Not that that's a best practice, but like, can they do the things that they want to do, both in the menu and on each individual type of page? And when you talk about each individual type of content page, you're talking about, a homepage option, some sort of description or product page, some sort of blog page, like all of the different page types that exist on a site, and making sure that each one of those is laid out specifically for its purpose. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Again, really unique things that I think set us apart. Here's my sales pitch that set us apart. That's why you should hire Unleashed. But things that when you take that step back and consider the end customer, you hate to say are in some ways common sense. But if we're thinking about taking the best care of them, we should be doing these things and making sure we're testing them so they know how to use it. Right. So that's the wireframes. What comes after the wireframes?
So kind
Or did
of
I
the
or
mid
did
one.
I miss something? Did I change topics too
No,
quick? You
no,
can
you
tell me.
didn't. No, you're good.
All right, after the
um,
wireframes.
yeah. So the we'll get into design, which is kind of the step that most people are probably thinking about, but kind of the step in between as we are getting these approved wireframes back is starting to create the requirements. So we document all of our requirements in a tool called Confluence that all of our clients would have access to for their specific project. Um, we are documenting everything here that we've learned thus far. So this can include things such as if we learned about, during that entire pre-process, anything about APIs or integrations that you might have. We've already been documenting this in Confluence. We don't want to come back to you a couple months later and be like, oh yeah, what was that integration that you had? So this document is living and breathing. This is a fully web-based thing that we're constantly adding to. So here's, once we have the wireframe starting to be approved, is where we start to really build out each page or section of the site and what functionality will be needed for each. So for example, when we're talking about the homepage, what fields are going to be required for this particular homepage? So we write out the business requirements. What is the general goal that we are doing with this? And then we kind of go a little bit more technical at this point. We would need, the admin would need a field to be able to update X, Y, and Z. If an end user would type into the search and a type ahead would appear here, the admin would be able to reorder these things, putting even like rules around things, because sometimes content governance needs to come into play. So should a content editor be able to add 16 squares all over the homepage, or do we need to set a rule that in the back end we are only allowing 4 because it will be way too busy if they add 16, or things like that, where we are defining exactly how things will work, as well as being a blueprint for the developers. So what happens, and we might get into this a little bit later because this is kind of just the beginning of the requirements, is what will happen is we will go through those requirements with the client and make sure that they understand every single thing that they're getting. They understand that they can't maybe edit this field, and they say, oh, I really want to be able to edit that field. No problem. Let's change the requirements. This is all done before we start building anything so that there's no surprises. These get signed off by the client so that we know exactly what we are being held to, and the client knows what they are getting.
Yeah.
So, we don't unveil this black curtain of here's your website. You have no idea how this back end is configured. We're talking about these things up front as we are going through these stages.
I mean, it really is the blueprint, right? You mentioned it. I mean, it's what we started the conversation with. okay, we've had these conversations. I've had the conversation with the architect. I've had the conversation with the designer. I've had the conversation with, whoever's going to pick out the paint colors and the curtain colors and all those different things of the house. And I'm going to know exactly what I'm getting. Are they thermal, double pane, triple pane windows? Like, can I open them? Can I close them? Right. To extrapolate the house analogy, I know everything I'm getting. I see the blueprint, I sign off on it. That's what this whole process here of laying out the technical requirements very clear and obvious up front. That way, no one's surprised. That's exactly what we're doing. I mean, is there anything that I missed there? Anything you would add there?
No.
Because at the end of the day, like you said, we don't want to go the ta-da, here's your new website, and they're like, well, I didn't say yes to that. I didn't know that was going to be the color or the position, right? That's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, right. So now comes the fun part, right? The part that everybody's been waiting for, the part that everybody gets the most excited about. Well, I don't know, the most excited, but it's the part where you can start to see things start to happen, right? What comes
Yeah.
next?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, the requirements are still going to be going on in the background, but now is when we add some life to those wireframes. So we will pull your brand in. We also do branding services if our client needs help with that, which we would do kind of later or earlier on rather. But we're pulling in the brand, we're pulling in the fonts, we're pulling in the colors, and we're adding flourishes and interactions and icons and making sure that this site is visually appealing. We're making sure that it's adhering to best practices. We're making sure that it's compliant. We're making sure that it is, mobile enhanced. So we do desktop designs as well as mobile designs. So usually, one of the things that we'll typically do is give the client a couple of options. So we will so we have our wireframes, so we know what content we need, but that content can look completely different. So what we typically do is do one design going one way, another design going another way, utilizing the colors differently, the fonts differently, organizing things differently, adding different flourishes or images differently, videos, whatever it is, and then get the client's reaction. We can also do A/B testing too, as well, which is often requested by clients if they kind of like both. Let's just say we'll be like, okay, let's ask the public which one do they like better, which one are they finding easier to navigate. So once we have a design direction, we will then kind of apply that and design out very meticulously all of the rest of the pages that we've identified from the developers that we need to design for. So kind of like we were talking about in the wireframes, we obviously are doing a homepage and all of that, but a search page, a product page, a different types of listing page, like a blog page that lists all the blogs. We will identify those templates that we need to design for. And then those are done again in a web-based tool. So that link will be sent to the client so that they can create comments on there. They can share them with whoever they need to. We can make them interactive, whereas if you were to click on something in the navigation, for example, it would go to that page in the designs. That's about as crazy as we might get. So we really are trying to figure out at this point in time, what exactly is it going to look like? So we kind of go through some revisions there. And like I said, this is mobile and desktop to ensure that we are completely covered. And yeah, once we have the approvals, then we kind of update the requirements. If anything has changed, we can get even more technical because here's some of the front end technical requirements can come in for exactly how something should function. If there's any animation or something or anything like that, we are noting that now in this phase. And like I mentioned, I'll just mention it again. It doesn't even have to just be the homepage. On a certain set of designs, we again can do user testing, making sure again that this is intuitive. This is encompassing the brand properly. We run it through accessibility, making sure that all of our colors are compliant, fonts are compliant, the sizing, everything is completely compliant before we even touch any bit of code.
Yeah, I mean, and that's again, it's one of those steps where when you talk about accessibility, we're talking about all kinds of different things. Color blindness is something that is one of the things that falls into that category, right? There's a lot of different. We shouldn't use a pink button on an orange background. I'm not sure that's exactly right, but like, I'm not even colorblind and that's hard to see, right? So like if someone who does, struggle with color blindness or has that as part of their day-to-day life, like we want to make sure that this site is usable for everybody. And
Yep.
that is especially relevant in associations and healthcare, and in your background, a lot of the areas of your background and expertise. But I think that's something that doesn't get applied to enough just sites in general from an e-commerce standpoint and all those things. It's all about brand. It's all about flash and splash. But at the end of the day, usability is so important. You don't want to overlook that. And so it's another thing that you have built into this strategy process to make sure that the site actually accomplishes the goals and the KPIs. Right. All of these things stack on top of what are we trying to accomplish and what's the best way to do it. Um, the last step or next to last step at this point, um, things start getting built, right? Like you've told me the next step is things start getting built, but that doesn't mean strategy goes away, right? You guys are still involved.
Yeah, we're still very involved, especially, if we're working in an agile fashion, then, we might still be writing and approving requirements and designs when the build is already going on. But just to think about it in a simpler way, as, development is going on, we are still making sure that we're working very closely with the developers, that they're following the requirements properly, if they have any questions. As pages are becoming ready for QA, we're making sure that everything is matching one to one with the requirements and with the designs. As we gear up for launch, we are making sure that things like all the proper SEO is in place, all of the proper schema is in place. If you need us to write schema, that's a thing that we include on a lot of our websites. So we do a lot of checks, especially as we're coming up right to launch, making sure that, for example, the 301 redirects are in place, making sure that on the day of launch, we're submitting it to Google Search Console. Not missing a beat, making sure that analytics are installed, that we have a benchmark of your analytics prior to the site launch, because, one of the things that we love to do is after the site is launched, let's look back in 6 months. Let's say, okay, your KPI was that you wanted more contact us submissions. You were getting 5 a month before the launch. Now that we're tracking that in Google Analytics, you are now getting 50. So
Mm-hmm.
have, what we set out to do, is it working? Can we validate that? So we don't want to just say, we think this will work. We pretty much can guarantee that it will. And that's why we want to kind of put, we're willing to just put that out there, that check, we'll keep tabs on this in 6 months. You're going to see an increase. So that's something that's kind of also involved with our ESP packages, is we like to, really stay closely involved after the site launches, making sure that if you need any help with SEO best practices, any new setups with analytics, where we also like to set up Looker Studio, formerly Google Data Studio dashboards, so that they can report back up to management and say, hey, we spent X amount on launching this new site, but look at us before launch, look at our numbers, now look at our numbers, our exact same numbers after launch, so that they can kind of justify things like that. So we're pretty much involved from start to finish,
Yeah.
even though it might not seem like we are.
Yeah, well, those ESP, those evolving services packages, it's a pretty common next step for a lot of our customers. Once a site launches, um, you kind of need to still take care of it. Websites require care and feeding. They're almost living, breathing beings, especially as the complexity increases. But as you think about, those ESP packages, I've heard you guys have conversations about road mapping year over year. What improvements need to be made. What are the new goals for the next year? What new page, section do we need to create? And then we kind of start this process over again with, okay, well, the goal of this new section is X. How do we go through this process and make sure that whatever we add and build through your evolving services package supports those goals? So I know, because I'm inside the building, so to speak, that strategy is involved with pretty much every project all the time. But what I also know is that not enough people know about what our strategy product is from beginning to end. And again, hence why we're having this conversation today, right? I wanted you to be able to share what you've built, why you've built it, how it impacts our customers, what our customers get at Unleash that's different. and even to encourage them to think about these projects a little bit differently as they're leading up to potentially doing an RFP or bringing a company like us in. Making sure you're having these conversations and thinking through things really strategically and really pointedly to make sure that the end product is what you actually want it to be and actually accomplishes those goals. Any final words that you'd like to share? I mean, this was so helpful, and obviously I get to see this more day in day out. Was there anything that you missed that you'd like to cover off on before we wrap up?
I just would say that this is kind of like the full gamut of the services. I would say that the way that we talked about it today was more in a website redesign scenario, but we have a lot of clients that use kind of a more mini version of this
Sure.
for initiatives. So let's just say you have a new campaign launching and you need a campaign landing page. So a lot of these steps we would go through mini versions of the same steps. So intake, doing wireframes, doing designs, testing those designs, making sure we have proper setup, stakeholder interviews, all those things don't necessarily just have to be for a rebuild, like we've kind of talked about it today. They can be on a much smaller scale, but should be thought through on smaller initiatives. Just because it's important, even if you are just creating a campaign landing page, you want to make sure it's impactful. So again, the best way to do that is to make sure you have the thought behind it, the facts, and you're not just creating a campaign page just to create a campaign page, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you're bringing in Caroline and the strategy team to make sure it's done the right way. Right on the right now. Okay, yeah. So you're so humble, you're so modest. You're like, yeah, I think it's a good idea, but it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Caroline, thanks for taking time to have a conversation today, sharing your experience, sharing your expertise. I think this is just endlessly valuable. So really excited to have had you on the podcast. If you guys have questions and want to reach out and learn more, have a conversation with Caroline or myself, we do offer strategy sessions. We do offer some of those types of things. So don't hesitate to reach out on our website, unleashed-technologies.com. Find me or Caroline on LinkedIn. Easily connect with us there, and we'll be happy to start a conversation with you. And as always, until next time, keep that technology unleashed.